Welcome to your deep dive. Ready to really make those coding skills shine for potential employers? We're diving into this resource all about personal coding projects, the kind that make interviewers go, wow, tell me more. And whether you're just starting out with coding or you've already got tons of experience, this deep dive's got something for you.
Yeah, you know what really struck me about this guide is how much it emphasizes aligning your passion with your project.
Oh, for sure.
It's not just about, showing off your technical skills, which is important, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It's about showcasing your problem-solving abilities
Yeah.
and that genuine love for the craft of coding.
Yeah, it's like that genuine enthusiasm can really make a difference, right? I remember when I was first getting into coding, I was so fixated on building this app, and it was probably totally extra, but it let you create custom playlists based on your mood using color palettes.
Oh, wow.
Totally unnecessary. Probably no one would have used it.
But I bet that excitement fueled you.
100%. Because I was so invested in it, I was refining those little details, and I really cared about the end result.
And that's what interviewers pick up on. That genuine enthusiasm is what makes you memorable.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, this guide also really stresses planning, like a lot. Having a roadmap for your entire project, not just the coding part.
And that's so crucial. Think about it like building a house. You're not just going to start laying bricks and hope it magically turns into this dream home.
Right.
You need blueprints.
Yeah.
You need that vision of the structure. What's the purpose of each element?
Yeah, it's like failing to plan is planning to fail, but for code. This guide even mentions specific tools like Trello and Asana.
And using tools like those, not only does it help you stay organized, but it shows potential employers that you have those time management skills, which, let's be honest, those are valuable everywhere, not just coding.
Totally, yeah. So, okay, let's talk about choosing the right tools for the job because this guide, it also emphasizes that a lot.
It's like understanding the tools of your trade, right? Like if you're building a website, you're not going to reach for a hammer and nails. You're going to need your HTML, CSS, and probably some JavaScript in there.
Right. And this guide actually gets into some specifics. It talks about, for web development, the MERN and MEAN stacks being popular options.
And they're popular for a reason. These stacks, they're well documented. They have large communities for support if you get stuck. They're used in tons of real-world applications. So opting for a stack that is familiar and well supported, it increases your chances of success, and it also gives you that safety net if you hit a roadblock.
Right, right. So it's like instead of just wandering through unfamiliar territory without a compass, you've got a detailed map to guide you.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got our roadmap, we've got our tools. Now let's talk about the code itself. Clean code. This guide is a huge advocate for that.
Yeah, and it makes sense. It's all about crafting code that's not just functional, but it's elegant, it's readable, it's maintainable. Think about it like, I don't know, the difference between a gourmet meal. I'm not going to say a bad meal, but
A less refined meal.
yeah, there you go. Both might satisfy your hunger, but one, shows that attention to detail.
It's the craftsmanship.
Exactly.
So how do we take our code from it works to it's a masterpiece? What are some of those key principles of clean code that we should be aiming for?
Imagine you're reading a book. Would you rather read a book that has, good structure, proper grammar, a logical flow, or one that's just like a jumbled mess of text?
Oh, a well-structured book any day.
Exactly. Clean code is that well-structured book.
Huh.
It's about clarity. It's about organization, making your code approachable. So that means breaking down these complex tasks into smaller, more manageable functions, using meaningful variable names, like what is this variable actually doing, and then adding those concise comments that guide the reader through your logic. Because when you're working on a large-scale project, that code base, it becomes this living document. It's constantly evolving, being updated, sometimes revisited months or even years later. So making that clean just makes your life and the lives of your collaborators so much easier.
And it probably makes debugging a lot easier, too.
Exactly. And smoother collaboration. And it also sends that message to employers, right? That you take pride in your work and you understand that good code is not just about making things work, but it's about craftsmanship.
It's 100% about craftsmanship. And this guide, it doesn't just stop at good enough. It wants us to add some wow factor features.
Right. And that's where things get really interesting.
But I have to say, some of these sound kind of intimidating, especially for someone who's not, a coding wizard. We're talking machine learning, cloud services, real-time features. How are we supposed to fit all of that into one project?
Yeah, and you don't have to go crazy. The point is to choose one or two that genuinely pique your interest and that align with the goals of your project.
Yeah.
Like if you're building a web app, maybe you could look into incorporating a cloud database. That way you can handle user data more efficiently.
Oh, okay. So it's about choosing those features strategically.
Exactly. Or if you're working on a mobile app, experiment with integrating some machine learning capabilities, maybe something like image recognition or personalized recommendations. And the best part is, there are a ton of resources out there to help you get started.
So it's like we've got this whole community of coding mentors cheering us on.
Exactly, exactly. Don't be afraid to dive in, ask for help when you need it, and embrace that learning process. That's what these projects are all about.
So we've got our roadmap, we're writing clean code, we're adding those wow features, we're learning as we go. What else do we need to keep in mind as we start actually building this thing?
Well, we can't forget about testing. Remember that house analogy we talked about earlier?
Oh yeah, with the blueprints and making sure everything is structurally sound.
Well, imagine building that house and then just assuming everything's good to go without any inspections. Would you want to risk it?
Not a chance.
Exactly. And in the coding world, the skipping testing, that's basically what you're doing. You're just asking for trouble down the line.
So testing is like our quality assurance, our way of making sure that our code is like rock solid.
Precisely. And this guide actually breaks down different types of testing that are essential.
Yeah.
It talks about unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests.
Okay, so remind me, what are those different tests all about?
Okay, so think of it like this. Unit tests are like checking that each individual brick in our house is strong. They're well made, no cracks or weaknesses. Then you've got integration tests, and those are all about making sure that those bricks actually fit together perfectly. They form those solid walls.
And I'm assuming the doors actually open and close.
Exactly. And then finally, you have those end-to-end tests, and that's like doing a final walkthrough of the entire house, testing every door, every window, every appliance to make sure everything works seamlessly together.
So it's our final inspection before we like hand the keys over to the new homeowner.
Exactly. Exactly. Thorough testing shows employers that you're not just slapping code together, you actually care about the quality and understand the importance of a polished and reliable product. Plus, it saves you from those really embarrassing moments where your code breaks down in the hands of users. Much better to catch those bugs early on.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And speaking of presenting our work, let's not forget about documentation, which I feel like is something that's often overlooked.
Oh yeah, it's super important. Think of it as the instruction manual for our well-tested code house.
Okay, I like that.
Good documentation.
Yeah.
It serves as a roadmap for anyone who wants to navigate your project. It makes it easier for them to understand, appreciate, and potentially even contribute to your work.
So it's like we're giving them the keys to our perfectly tested code house along with a detailed floor plan so they can actually find their way around.
Exactly. And speaking of showcasing our work, let's talk about deployment. That's where things get really exciting because you're finally sharing your project with the world, letting others experience it firsthand.
It's like the grand opening of our code house where we can finally invite users in to explore all the features. But I have to say, the world of deployment can be kind of overwhelming. There are so many different platforms and methods. Where do we even begin?
Well, this guide gives us a few good starting points. It mentions some popular platforms like Heroku, Netlify, and Vercel, which are all known for being relatively user-friendly, especially when it comes to deployment.
Oh yeah, I've heard of those. And I think this guide also touched on something called a CI/CD pipeline, which, if I'm being honest, sounded a little intimidating.
I hear you. It can sound a bit technical at first, but think of a CI/CD pipeline as having this dedicated team of automated assistants that handles the technical side of deploying your code every time you make changes. It just streamlines the process, saves you time, and it makes sure your project is always up to date.
So instead of us having to like manually upload our code every time we make a little tweak, a CI/CD pipeline just takes care of that for us behind the scenes.
Precisely. It's like having an invisible crew handling all the heavy lifting of deployment, so you can focus on what you actually enjoy, which is writing the code.
That is incredibly useful, especially as our projects become larger and more complex. Okay, so it's like we've got this well-oiled machine making sure that our code house is always open for business and running smoothly.
Exactly. And showing potential employers that you understand these more professional development practices, it really makes a strong impression. Because it shows you're thinking about that bigger picture of software development, not just here's the code, but how does this actually get deployed? How do we make sure that it's delivered smoothly?
Right, so it's like we're not just building a code house, we're creating that whole infrastructure to support it. from the foundation to, like, the landscaping.
I like that analogy. So, okay, we've deployed our project. It's out there for the world to see. People can actually interact with it. Now, how do we make it stand out? How do we make sure it gets the attention it deserves? That's where showcasing comes in.
Right, because we can build this fantastic project, but if no one sees it, then did we really build it? I'm kidding, of course, but we want to make sure people actually see all the hard work that went into this.
Exactly. Exactly. And this guide actually gives some really great tips on how to effectively showcase your work. And it all starts with your GitHub repository.
Ah, GitHub, the coder's playground. It's where we store our code, maybe collaborate with others, but it's more than just a digital filing cabinet for our projects, right?
Right. Think of your GitHub repository as your project's online portfolio.
Mhm.
It's that first impression for potential employers, for collaborators. So we need to make it count.
So instead of just like dumping our code there, we want to present it in a way that's easy to understand, easy to navigate, visually appealing.
Exactly. A well-crafted README file is essential. That's like your elevator pitch for your code. What is this project all about? What does it do? How can I get it running?
That makes a lot of sense because a well-written README file, someone can very quickly see what your project's all about, and then they're going to want to dive in deeper into the code itself.
Exactly. And don't forget the visuals, screenshots, GIFs, anything that can show off your project's functionality, because those are going to be much more engaging than just walls and text.
Oh, what about a demo video? Because I'm imagining that would be really interesting to watch, to see the project in action.
Absolutely. A well-made demo video, it can bring your project to life, and it provides that dynamic and engaging way to actually showcase those features. You're essentially giving a guided tour of your code house instead of just handing someone a map.
Right. Because, like they say, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, imagine how many a video is worth.
Exactly. Exactly. And if you want to take it a step further, you could even consider writing a blog post or an article about your project, detailing your thought process, maybe some challenges you overcame, some lessons you learned along the way.
It's like we're sharing the story behind the code, giving people a glimpse into the creative journey and the problem solving that went into building this whole thing.
Yes. And that also highlights your communication skills, which
Yeah.
is really valuable. Give some context to your approach to coding.
It's like we're not just presenting a code house, but we're giving people the blueprints and a behind-the-scenes tour of its construction.
Exactly. And remember, showcasing your project, this isn't just about impressing those potential employers. It's about connecting with the broader developer community, getting feedback, even contributing to the open source world.
So it's like we're having this open house for our code creation, and anyone who's interested can come and explore and give us their thoughts.
Exactly, exactly. It's fostering that collaborative spirit and learning from other people in the field.
Networking is so important,
It is.
especially in the world of coding. So, okay, we've built this amazing project. We've showcased it. We're networking with our fellow coders. Now comes that moment of truth, the interview. Any tips for how to absolutely crush it when we get there?
Well, luckily, this guide, it doesn't just leave you hanging in the interview room. It actually gives you some really valuable tips on how to discuss your project with potential employers.
Okay, interview prep time. So, what are some key things that we should keep in mind when we're talking about our projects in an interview?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that you're not just reciting lines of code. You're telling a story, the story of your project. Interviewers, they want to understand your thought process. What was your approach to solving this problem? And really, what's the passion behind it?
So, instead of just like listing off the technical details, we should really focus on conveying that why. What problem were we trying to solve? What inspired us?
Exactly, exactly. And, think back to those challenges you faced while you were building this. How did you overcome those? What creative solutions did you find? Those are things that really highlight your skills and your resilience.
So it's like we're not just presenting the finished product, we're taking them on a journey, right?
Exactly. And, be prepared for those technical deep dives. They might ask you about your tech stack, why you chose that, the architecture of your project, maybe some specific decisions you made. So find that balance between going into the technical details, but doing it in a way that's still engaging and easy to understand.
So it's like we're giving a tour of our code house, but we should be prepared to answer questions about like the plumbing and the electrical wiring.
Exactly, exactly. And amidst all of those technical details, let that enthusiasm shine through. If you're genuinely excited about this project, that passion is contagious.
Oh, 100%. It's like the difference between reading a recipe and then hearing a chef describe their signature dish. There's just something about that enthusiasm that just makes you want to try it.
Absolutely. And while landing that dream job is a fantastic motivator, It's important to remember that these projects, they're not just about getting hired. They're about your continuous learning and growth as a coder.
So even after we've launched our project and aced those interviews, we shouldn't stop exploring.
Exactly. Embrace the fact that software development is always evolving. Be open to new ideas, new technologies. Don't ever stop learning.
It's true. You've got to keep learning in this field. It's always changing. There's always something new to explore. Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. From picking that perfect project to writing clean code, incorporating those wow features, and then navigating testing, documentation, deployment, showcasing, the whole 9 yards.
And, while we're thinking about the process, there's one more thing from this guide that I wanted to circle back to.
Yeah.
Remember that example of the JavaScript code, the one for calculating factorials?
Oh, yeah. How could I forget? It was so well structured and clear. It was like reading like a really good instruction manual. Even I could follow along. And I'll be honest, my JavaScript skills are a little rusty.
Exactly. And that example, it just highlights one of the most important takeaways from this whole guide.
Yeah.
Focus on quality over quantity.
So it's better to have a smaller project, maybe a little more focused, but it's well crafted, it's been thoroughly tested, it's got good documentation, than something that's super ambitious but maybe feels a little rushed or incomplete.
Exactly. Remember, this project, it's a reflection of your skills and your passion. Don't feel like you have to go out there and build the next Google right away. Start with a problem that genuinely interests you, something that you're excited about, and just pour your heart into making that exceptional.
It's like that saying, measure twice, cut once. But for code, it's about taking your time, being intentional, and making sure every line serves a purpose.
Exactly. And even a smaller project, if it's well executed, it can really showcase your potential as a coder. It shows that you understand the core programming principles, that you're committed to quality, that you can learn, and you can adapt.
Yeah, it's not about just how many lines of code you can write, but the thought and care that goes into each one.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this whole conversation, it's this. Embrace the journey of coding. It's a journey full of challenges, for sure, but also those aha moments and endless opportunities to learn and grow.
Don't be afraid to jump in, experiment, make mistakes along the way. Every expert coder was once a beginner, right? And every amazing project started with a single line of code.
Exactly. So to everyone listening, if you're feeling inspired to start your own coding adventure, go for it. We're here to support you every step of the way.
Happy coding, everyone!